We are here again with Ylimmw, and we are continuing chapter 18, Puraumrum, the 5 causes of disease. All the members of the body are potentially contained in the center of the vital fluid, which has its seat in the brain, while the activity which propels it comes from the heart. This doctrine is corroborated by modern discoveries. Amputations of limbs are followed by a state of atrophy of certain parts of brain substances, which seems to indicate that the force which shapes the limbs has its center in the brain. If certain parts of the brain were destroyed, the limbs would begin to atrophy. If we apply this mode of reasoning to the macrocosm, we find that all the essences and ethers that go to make up the organs of the macrocosm are also contained in its center, the sun. And if a certain element were taken away from the sun, the planets could not exist. If a certain element that goes to form the legs of men were suddenly taken away from the universal storehouse of the macrocosm, human beings would be born without legs. If no principle of reason existed, there would be no use for brains, and so on. Mind is not created by the brain. Neither is love nor hate created by the heart. But mind acts through the brain, and love and hate have their origin in the will. A man who is angry is not only angry in his head or in his fist, but all over. A person who loves does not love with his eyes, but with his whole being. In short, all of his organs of his body and the body itself are only form manifestations of previously and universally existing mental states. The body of a man is his house. The architect who built it is the astral world. The carpenters are at one time Jupiter, at another Venus, at one time Taurus, at another Orion. I was watching something interesting, and they said that there were references in Aramaic, the biblical Hebrew, as it's typically called, that the Nephilim meant that they were beings of Orion, in one sense or another, right? Which doesn't necessarily mean that they thought that they were aliens from somewhere else, but perhaps they were the cult of Orion. Man is a sun and moon, and a heaven filled with stars. The world is a man, and the light of the sun and the stars is his body. The ethereal body cannot be grasped, and yet it is substantial. Because if it had no substance, it could not exist. If the life of the sun did not act in the world, nothing would grow. The human body is vapor, materialized by sunshine, mixed with the life of the stars. 4 elements are in the world, and man consists out of 4. And that which exists visibly in man exists invisibly in the ether, pervading the world. Where is the workman that cuts out the forms of the lilies and roses that grow in the field? And where is his workshop and tools? The character of the lilies and roses exists in the astral light, and in the workshop of nature, they are made into forms. A blooming flower cannot be made out of mud, nor a man out of the material clay. And he who denies the formative power of the astral light and believes that forms grow out of the earth, believes that something can be taken out of a body in which it does not exist. The power of sight does not come from the eye. The power to hear does not come from the ear, nor the power to feel from the nerves. But it is the spirit of man that sees through the eye, and hears with the ear, and feels by means of the nerves. Wisdom and reason and thought are not contained in the brain, but they belong to the invisible and universal spirit of man that sees through the eye and hears with the ear and feels by means of the nerves. Wisdom and reason and thought are not contained in the brain, but they belong to the invisible and universal spirit of man that sees through the eye and hears with the ear and feels by means of the nerves. Wisdom and reason and thought are not contained in the brain, but they belong to the invisible and universal spirit, which feels through the heart and thinks by means of the brain. All these powers are contained in the invisible universe and become manifest through material organs, and the material organs are their representatives and modify their mode of manifestation according to the material construction, because a perfect manifestation of power can only take place in a perfectly constructed organ, and if the organ is faulty, the manifestation will be imperfect, but not the original power defective. The fourth cause, disease originating from spiritual causes. This class of diseases includes all evils that are caused by passions, evil desires, disordered thoughts, and morbid imagination. Such psychological states may produce psychological changes in the physical body. Shame produces a blush in the face, and terror produces a paleness. Fear causes diarrhea. Melancholy, obstructions, anger or envy give rise to jaundice. Gaiety may cure, and grief may kill. Violent emotions produce miscarriages. Apoplexy, spasms, hysterics, and cause malformations of the foetus, etc., etc. Such things are known to all who have investigated in such matters, but it is less generally known that the evil imagination of one person may affect the mind of another, poison his vitality, and injure or kill his body. The reason why this is not generally known is that the imagination of the majority of men and women at the present state of civilization is too weak, their will is too feeble, and their faith too much pervaded by doubt to produce the desired effects. And it is fortunate that their imagination, however evil it may be, has not much power as long as the state or morality is not higher advanced than it is at present. Now, we run into two problems in modern society, is this emo culture, if you want to call it that, this social justice warrior culture that's I think higher, the emos than the social justice warriors, but this desire to feel oppressed, claiming oppression when it's not actually happening, and wanting to be offended about everything. It's just, some craziness right there, right? Their faith is too much pervaded by how evil may be. To think is to act on the plane of thought, and if the thought is intense enough, it surely will produce an effect on the physical plane. It is very fortunate that few persons possess the power to make it act directly on the physical plane, because there are few persons who never have any evil thoughts entering into their minds. Now, wasn't even Jesus tempted, if that's going to be the thought here? Nevertheless, There have been persons whose evil will was so strong as to project the products of their imagination instinctively or consciously upon a person. Whom they desired to injure. And such persons are still in existence, although they may not deem it prudent to boast of their gifts. Or to exhibit their powers in public. Envy and hate produce an evil imagination and create forces that may be more active during sleep than during waking. The evil thoughts of a malicious person may affect another person, not only while the former is awake, but also during his sleep, because when the physical body is asleep, the sidereal body is free to go wherever it pleases, or wherever it may be attracted. The life that is active in the organs is the anima vegetativa, the animal soul. It is an invisible fire. It can be easily blown into a flame by the power of the imagination. Imagination can create hunger and thirst and produce abnormal secretions and cause diseases. But a person who has no evil desires will have no evil imagination, and no disease will spring from his thoughts. A person who has evil desires will have an evil imagination, and the forces created in the sphere of his mind may be projected by powerful will into the mental sphere of another. Thoughts are not empty nothings, but they are formed out of the substance that forms the element of the soul, in the same sense as a piece of ice is made out of the substance of water. The will is the power that may concentrate the image formed in the mind, in the same sense as the power of cold will cause a body of water to freeze into solid ice, as an icicle may be thrown from one place to another. Likewise, an evil thought, formed into shape by an intense will, may be hurled against the mental sphere of another and enter his soul, if it be not sufficiently protected. Imagination and doubt of self are the cause of many diseases. Faith in self is the cure for all. If you cannot cure a disease by faith, it is because your faith is too weak. But your faith is weak on account of your want of knowledge. If you were conscious of the power of yourself, you could never fail. The power of amulets does not rest so much in the material of which they are made as in the faith with which they are worn. The curative power of medicine often consists not so much in the spirit that is hidden in them as the spirit in which they are taken. Faith will make them efficacious. Doubt will destroy their virtues. The ens spirituale is the will. The power of the true spiritual will is known only to a few advanced occult students. In this Western country, men of strong and determined will are few and far between. Men and women are ruled to a great extent by their instincts and desires, and have not sufficient willpower to control them. The ens spirituale is a power which may affect the whole body and produce or cure all kinds of diseases. It is neither an angel nor a devil, but it is a spiritual power which, in the living body, is born from our thoughts. There are two principles active in man. One is the principle of matter, which constitutes the corporeal, visible body. The other one is the spirit, intangible and invisible. And the spiritual principle may be vitiated and diseased as well as the body, and transmit its diseases to the body. The ens astral and veneni and natural act upon the body, but the ens spiritual and ideal belong to the spirit. If the body suffers, the spirit need not suffer, but if the spirit suffers, the body must suffer. The body cannot live without the spirit, but the spirit is not confined by the body. The spirit in man sustains the body as the air supplies him with life. It is substantial, visible, tangible, and perceptible to other spiritual entities, and spiritual beings stand to each other in the same relationship as one corporeal being to another. I have a spirit, and you have one, and our spirits communicate with each other in the same sense as our bodies. But while undeveloped souls still in the body need language to understand each other, the spirits understand each other without using words. If one spirit is angry at another, it may injure him, and the injury received may be transmitted upon the body of the latter. Spirits may harmonize and associate with each other, or they may repulse and injure one another. Spirits are not born from the intellect, but from the will. He who lives according to the will lives in the spirit. He who lives according to the mind lives in disharmony with the spirit. The mind produces no spirit, but it determines the qualities of the soul. There is no strong spiritual power in babies, because they have no perfect will. Well, they're perfect with what they have, though. As in, they're blameless at that age. He whose will is perfected gives birth to a spirit, as a pebble produces a spark, and the spiritual power partakes of the nature of the will. He who lives in the will possesses the spirit, i.e. the ens spiritual, the corporeal and spiritual world. There is a corporeal world and a spiritual world, and the two are one, and the spiritual beings live in their own spiritual world as souls still in the body live in theirs. They have their likes and dislikes, their sympathies and antipathies like ourselves, and they do not always agree with the likes and dislikes of the bodily forms. Men may quarrel and fight with each other, and their spirits, nevertheless, be in harmony. But if a spirit injures another spirit, the material body of the latter may become also affected. The spirits of men may act upon each other without man's consent or intention, unconsciously and involuntarily to him. But if a man's will is in unity with his thought and desire a spirit will to be produced, which may be employed for good or evil. Now, let us remember that certain beliefs and actions, or lack of beliefs and actions, can open a person up in ways they may not be intended to open up. So when people talk about giving entities permission, or giving the spiritual master, really his spectral spirits that supposedly work for him, as he believes, well, it can happen in different ways, right? If two such spiritual forces battle with each other, the weaker one, or the one which does not defend itself sufficiently, will be overcome, and bodily diseases may be the result. An evil-disposed person may throw the force of his will upon another person, and injure him, even if the latter is stronger than the former, because the latter may not expect to be prepared for the attack. But if the stronger one resists successfully, then a force will be kindled in him, which will overcome his enemy, which may destroy him. Waxen images, figures, etc., may be used to assist the imagination and to strengthen the will. Thus, a necromancer may take a waxen image of a person and bury it, covering it with heavy stones, and if his will and imagination are powerful enough, the person whom it represents will feel very miserable until that weight is removed. Likewise, if he break a limb of that figure, a limb may be broken in him whom it represents, or he may thus inflict cuts, stabs, or other injuries upon an enemy. It is all done through the spirit acting upon the spirit. No necromancer can, by his will, act directly upon the body of a person, but he can act upon his spirit, and the spirit of the injured person reproduces the injury upon his own body. Thus a necromancer may cut a tree, and he who cuts the tree cuts himself. That is to say, he does not cut his body, but the spirit, who has the same limbs as the body, and the cuts made upon the spirit may be reproduced upon the body. Thus the spirit of a person may, without the assistance of his body, and without a knife or sword, cut or stab or injure another person by the mere force of imagination and will, and images may be cursed effectively, and fever, apoplexy, epilepsy, etc. will be caused thereby. But our scientists have no conception of what a power the will is, and they do not believe in such things because they are beyond their comprehension. The will produces such spirits, and they may also act upon animals, and it is even easier to affect the latter than to affect man, because the spirit of man is better able to defend itself than that of an animal. Not only may a necromancer thus consciously injure another person by his evil will and imagination. Well, let's not determine good and evil by mere harm or not, right? But the spirit of the envious, jealous, revengeful, and wicked persons may, even if they are ignorant of the practices of sorcery, injure the objects of their evil will while the bodies of the former are asleep. For dreams which come from the spirit are truly enacted, but dreams which do not come from the spirit have no such effects. One poison may render another poison harmless, and thus the effect of the imagination of one person may neutralize the effects of the imagination of another. If anyone can make an image of wax to injure your body, you make another image to attract the evil spell. His image obtains its power by the force of his faith, and your image obtains its virtue by the power of your faith. And the injuries inflicted by your enemies upon the image will leave you unharmed, and the curses he heaps upon you will return to him and leave you unhurt. Well, the best defense is to make it more or less a conditional curse. You know, a curse that keeps people from getting worse in belief and action, that prevents certain wrong things from happening through them, a binding, as it will, because you don't want a curse that might not be deserved because it returns to you. You don't want something that you're going to feel guilt or shame over. You don't want something that you can't just say or do and then leave it, right? That, oh, it's not happening when and how I want, that sort of thing. If a person is gloomy and despondent, he ought not to be left alone, but he ought to have someone to cheer him up and to explain to him that he must free himself of his own morbid thoughts. There are some who believe that it is possible for witches to pass through the doors and to vampirize people, but no witch can bodily pass through a closed door in the way in which this is done by the Sliffs and Pigmies. O you, doubtful man, you Thomas of little faith, who are moved by each wind and sink easily, you are yourself the cause of all such diseases, because your faith is so little and feeble, and your own evil thoughts are your enemies. Moreover, you have hidden within yourself a magnet which attracts these evil influences which correspond to your will, and this celestial magnet is such power that for more than 100 or even thousands of miles it attracts that which your spirit desires out of the four elements. The fifth cause, disease originating from the soul. All diseases are the effects of previously existing causes. Some originate from the natural and others from spiritual causes. Spiritual causes are those who have not been created by a man during his present life, but which he has created during a former existence. For such cause there is no remedy but to wait patiently until the evil force is exhausted and the law of justice satisfied. For even if the just retribution for our sins could be evaded at one time, it would only be postponed, and the evil would return at another time with an accumulation of interest and with increased force. All diseases originating from the four causes already mentioned may be cured by the power of the true faith. All health and all diseases come through the soul, and in the soul lies the cure. Some diseases, however, do not directly come from the soul, but are natural. Well, it's all natural in one way or another, right? Some diseases, each disease is a purgatory, and no ordinary physician can know exactly when or how it will end. The physician is only a servant of his soul. If it is the predestination of the patient that he should still remain in his purgatory, then will the ordinary physician not help him out of it? Well, he tries because he doesn't know whatever, and it's part of the predestination that this help would have came, and predestination doesn't preclude our choices, right? But if his time for redemption has come, then will the patient find the physician through whom his soul will send him relief. The common physician may cure the sick by using remedies, but it is the spirit or soul who makes the physician and the remedy. The soul, still in the body, does not perform miracles without man. It acts through the instrumentality of man, and restores the sick to health through the instrumentality of their own soul, and therefore he who wishes to cure must be in possession of faith, so as to be a perfect instrument through which the cure may be accomplished. He who expects help from medicine or from a physician has no true faith in his own soul. True faith in your own soul is the first and most potent physician. Human physicians are not only its deputies. Call not for help to man, but ask it from the spirit of the soul acting through man, and it will send you the physician. It will aid you through the power within yourself, provided you have faith in yourself. Two kinds of punishment are waiting for the one who doubts the power of his soul. One takes place during his life, the other one after his death. Soul is the master, and the physician is her servant. And let no physician fancy that he can be a master of nature unless he is a servant of the spirit power of the soul. There are two ways of practicing the medical art. The first is to employ art. The second is to employ fancy. The former means the employment of observation, reason, knowledge, experience, and wisdom. The latter is the product of speculation, self-conceit, preconceived opinions, and ignorance. Those who are wise will know which way to choose. No ordinary physician should presume to know the hour of recovery in such cases, because it is not given to him to judge of the recovery of another. And the inner temple contains mysteries in which no uninitiated stranger is permitted to pry. Nothing in the world happens without a cause. Ignorant physicians are the servants of materialism, but the true physician is the spirit, our soul power. Nature does nothing in an unnatural manner, and if it produces wonders, it produces them through human beings. Nature does not go to see a patient. If it comes to him, it comes through the soul who has faith in itself. If a town possesses a good physician, people may look upon him as a blessing, but presence of an ignorant doctor is a public calamity and a curse to all. The doctrine of karma. A misunderstanding of the doctrine of karma may give rise to an erroneous belief which may be productive of serious harm. There are great numbers of religious fanatics in the East, and some in the West, who would not make an attempt to pull a person out of a burning house, even if they could easily do so, because they believe that it is the will of God, or his karma. Well, karma is what is, right? If you help him, it's still karma. That he should perish in the fire. It would be wrong to interfere with that law and to frustrate the purpose of God. Are they doing this out of laziness rather than zeal? They should remember that it was the will of God which caused such a person to fall into danger. It must also have been the will of God which sent them near and enabled them to save. And if they neglected to do their duty and suffer him to perish, they are arrogating to themselves the prerogatives as if they're gods and goddesses. They then act against the law and will become responsible for their act. Nature acts through man, and a man who does not respond to nature's call and refuses to obey the divine commands spoken within his heart is a useless instrument and will be rejected. 5 classes of physicians. As there are 5 classes of diseases, so there are 5 different ways of removing them, and therefore 5 classes of physicians. First, naturals, i.e., those who treat disease conditions with opposite remedies. For instance, cold by warmth, dryness by moisture, etc., according to the principle contrarius. Curantur. To this class belonged Avicenna, Galen, etc., allopathy, hydrotherapy, and so on. Second, specifici, if you're going to give it a real old Latin pronunciation, such as employs specific remedies of which it is known that they have certain affinities for certain morbid conditions. To this class belong the empirics, homeopathy. Third, characteralis. The physicians of this class will have the power to cure diseases by employing their willpower, magnetism, hypnotism, occult power, mind cure. Spiritualists. Spiritualists. The followers of this system have the power to employ spiritual forces in the same sense as a judge has power over a prisoner in the stocks, because he is in possession of the keys. Spiritual and occult cures. Such a physician is the writer. Fifth, fidelis, i.e., those who cure by the power of faith in self, such as Christ and the apostles. Among these 5 classes, the first one is the most orthodox and narrow-minded, and they reject the other 4 because they are not able to understand them. From each of the 5 causes of diseases, all kinds of diseases may spring, and each kind of disease may therefore be divided into 5 classes according to its cause. There are consequently 5 kinds of plague, and 5 kinds of cholera, 5 kinds of dropsy, cancer, etc. Well, why divide into 5? There's a lot more than that, but if, for instance, a plague appears, the naturalist will say it is caused by a disorganization of the bodily structures, while the astrologer will say it is caused by a certain constellation of planetary influences. But there may be 3 more causes which produced that epidemic and which will determine its character. Moreover, each disease may manifest itself in 2 ways, one of which belongs to the department of medicine, the other one the department of surgery. That which radiates from the center belongs to medicine. That which is localized, i.e. circumscribed, or confined to a certain locality, belongs to surgery. Each physician, no matter to which sect he belongs, should know that the 5 causes of diseases and the 5 methods of treatment, but each method may be in itself sufficient to cure all diseases, no matter from what cause they originated. No knowledge is perfect unless it includes an understanding of the origin, i.e. the beginning, and as all of man's diseases originate in his constitution, it is necessary that his constitution should be known if we wish to know his diseases. The Bible states that man is made out of nothing, that is to say, his spirit, the real man, is from God, who is not a thing but the eternal reality, but he is made into 3 somethings or substances, and these 3 constitute the whole of man. They are himself, and he is they, and from them he receives all that is good or evil for him. Every state in which man can possibly enter is determined by number, measure, and weight. The 3 substances are the 3 forms or modes of action, in which universal primordial will is manifesting itself throughout nature, for all things are a trinity in a unity. The salt represents the principle of corporification, the astringent, corporification. The astringent are the contractive and solidifying quality, or in other words, the body. The sulfur represents the expansive power, the centrifugal force, in contradistinction to the centrifugal motion of the first quality. It is that which burns, i.e., the soul or light, in all things. And the mercury is the life, i.e., that principle or form of will, which manifests itself as vitality. Each of these forms of will is an individual power. Nevertheless, they are substantial, for spirit and force are one and originate from the same cause. The three substances held together in harmonious proportions constitute health. Their disharmony constitutes disease, and their disruption, death. These three substances should be practically known to the physician, for his usefulness does not consist in merely possessing theoretical knowledge. But in his ability to restore health. He must learn to know these substances by studying them by nature's light, not by seeking them in his own imagination. He should become able to see nature as she is, and not as he or others may imagine her to be. His art should be baptized in the fire. He must be himself born from the fire, and have been tested in it 7 times and more. No one is born a physician out of himself, but out of the light of nature, and this light is the great world. He should pass through the examination of nature and know her laws. He should not seek for wisdom in his own brain, but in the light of nature, and from the ability to recognize his light springs the true science. Not in the physician, but in the light of nature, is to be found true wisdom and art, and theory, and practice. But those who cannot find wisdom in that light and seek for it in their own brain will continually err. There is nothing in a man which would cause him to be a physician. He has the capacity to comprehend intellectually, but this does not constitute art. His faculty is like an empty box, useful only to store up useful things. To make it more clear what I intend to express, let us look at these 2 examples, the glassmaker and the carpenter. The glassmaker did not learn his art for himself. He found it in the light of nature, for nature showed him how to melt the materials by means of the fire, and discover the glass for him. But a carpenter who builds a house may construct it according to his own wisdom, provided he has the necessary materials. A physician may have the necessary materials, i.e., the patient and the remedies, but he is not a true physician as long as he has not the true science. The glassmaker is taught by nature, the carpenter follows his own fancy, the former is taught by the fire, and the true physician receives from the fire of nature his wisdom and his art, i.e., his experience. This is his true approbation. The ignorant refuses to follow nature, and they follow their own speculations. Wisdom is twofold. One wisdom comes from experience, the other from aptitude. The former, again, is twofold, and is based either upon the understanding of the law or upon haphazard experiment. The former is the one upon which true medicine rests, and implies the knowledge of the 3 substances. The latter is merely supposition and error, for an haphazard experiment may succeed once and fail in the future. The student of nature should not follow in the footsteps of men, but in the footsteps of nature. He should not act on account of hearsay, but on account of his own spiritual understanding. The first man who learned anything useful was taught by nature. Let nature teach you as she taught him. If my art is to be based upon a firm foundation, it must be based upon my own spiritual understanding and not upon that of another man. A physician should have the soul before his eyes, visibly and tangibly. He should see the truth, not shadowy or as in a dream, but tangibly and without any doubt. The student's knowledge should be based upon a perception of the truth, not upon mere belief or opinion. Information received from men can only assist you in forming opinions, but it constitutes no knowledge. True knowledge consists in a direct recognition of the truth, and is taught by nature herself. As far as the patient is concerned, there are 3 things required of him to effect a cure. His disease should be a natural one. He should have a certain amount of will and a certain amount of vitality. If these conditions are not present, no cure can be effected, for even Christ could not benefit those who were not receptive of his power. This power is faith, and it should be present in the patient as well as the physician. Christ did not say to the sick, "I cured thee," but he said, "Thy faith made thee whole." It is not the physician who heals the sick, but it is nature who heals him through faith, and the true physician is merely the instrument through which nature acts upon the disease of the patient. The patient should therefore have faith and confidence in his physician. True faith acts according to the universal law and makes no exceptions in special cases, but all power comes from the soul and may be guided properly, or as action impeded by the patient. God kills no one. It is doubt and fear which causes people to die. Nature is life, and the physician in whom the power of nature is manifest will be a fountain of life and health to the sick. To nature belongs the praise, and to man the blame. Those who attempt to cure diseases by their own power without recognizing the eternal source of all power will never know the deeper mysteries of nature. They deal with speculation, and do not perform the will of nature, and if they injure their patients, it is they themselves who are responsible for it. Those who attempt to cure the sick by means of what they learn in books, and without using their own judgment, are like the foolish virgins mentioned in the Bible, who wasted the oil from their lamps, and tried to borrow light from others. Those whose minds are open for the reception of truth, who are charitable to all, who love their art for its own sake, and seek to do the will of the spirit and soul, they belong to my school, and are my disciples. They will be taught by the light of wisdom, and nature will perform her miracles through their instrumentality. Why is the practice of medicine and treatment of disease by me almost incomprehensible to the modern practitioner? It is because the latter seeks to treat the diseased organs themselves, which are, as such, merely the external effects of internal causes, and he knows of no other way to act upon them except by mechanical or chemical means, materialism, while the method of treatment by the writer, by means of which he has made the most wonderful cures, is to change the interior causes from which the outward effects grow, to treat the very essences out of which the corporeal organs become crystallized, and to supply them with the power of vitality, of the quality of which they require. To accomplish this deep insight into the causes of diseases, spiritual perception, spiritual knowledge, and spiritual power are needed, and these are qualities that belong not to that which is human in man, but to the light of the Spirit which shines into him. For this reason, the arcana of the writer has been universally misunderstood, and is believed by many that his secret remedies are certain compounds which he concocted, and which might be prepared by them by any apothecary, if he were put in possession of the prescriptions for them. This is, however, not the case. A prescription that might be learned from books is not an arcanum. A secret that might be communicated intellectually from one person to another is not a divine or spiritual mystery. An arcanum is an incorporeal and indestructible of eternal life, superhuman and beyond disease. In the human soul, it is the arcanum Dei, or the arcanum Natura. The arcanum is the virtue of a thing in its highest potency. The arcanum Hominis is that power of man which is eternal in him. A cow can give birth to nothing else but a calf. A monkey cannot produce a man, neither can he who has not himself been reborn in the spirit produce or endow things with spiritual power. Man must himself be and realize that which he desires to produce. The first arcanum is the Mercurius Vivus. The second is the Prima Materia. The third is the Lapis Philosophorum. And the fourth, the tinctura. These remedies are rather of an occult than of a material character. If the mind or imagination could create a disease, surely the same will, acting within the soul of man, can cure all diseases. But only that will which is active in man, and not that which is outside of him, can act within his organization. And before a man becomes able to send his will within the soul of another person, his own will must become godlike and free, or surrendered unto God, at the very least, right? A hypnotist literally controls the will of a patient and acts upon his imagination, but the magic power of the true adept is the power of the spirit acting through him. Such powers do not belong to that which is mortal in man, but to that which is divine, and therefore those who wish to graduate in the esoteric works of the writer and follow his example will have to become regenerated in the spirit of the soul. And this turtle that has made his way here inside is one that I've had since 1995, September 23rd, maybe? And he is an ornate box turtle, also known as Gulf Coast or Western box turtle, and